Hey y'all, this is Melissa Watson Ward with Shattering Ceilings here on the Arena SC. Thank y'all for joining us for another interview. Today, we're going to interview Meagan Diedolf, Senior Vice President of Policy and Government Relations for Conservation Voters of South Carolina. So you may be like, well, what is Conservation Voters of South Carolina? I may not have ever heard of them, or maybe you have heard of them but you're not really sure who they are, what they do. So, Meagan, thank you for joining us this today. Can you talk a little bit about who CVSC is?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about what the arena and your group are doing. It's much
Thank
needed
you.
in South Carolina. So I work with the Conservation Voters of South Carolina. We just had our 20th anniversary last year, so we've been around for a good while. But we were sort of created in order to be an environmental advocacy organization that could use all of those tools in the toolbox that other organizations utilize to advance good environmental policy in the South Carolina General Assembly. So when I say that we have a number of different parts of our organization geared in separate directions, but that all sort of coalesce towards that goal of protecting our state's air, land, and water, which we all love and which we all need to be clean and pristine as best we can. So we've got a really robust partnerships department that works to find grassroots and grasstops partners in intersectional areas that can kind of give us policy cues from directly from the community that we can then take and build policy to see at the General Assembly. And then we can also sort of take what's happening at the General Assembly and bring it to them and let them know what's going on and where we need advocacy and when we need a little bit of help and an extra push. And then we also have a really great political department that's able to utilize a PAC and a campaign tools to get good or candidates elected. And then when they're successful, my department at Government Relations and Policy is set up to find legislative champions to usher really good bills that protect the environment through the entire legislative process. So it's kind of a holistic approach to getting that goal, and it's a really exciting way to do work at the General Assembly.
So, Megan, I'm by no means a policy expert, but I have been reading some policies and some policy positions of the different political parties, the different candidates for president, and there's a policy platform voting out there that wants to do a lot of deregulation, and remove environmental protections, and I think most of our listeners are pretty politically engaged, but those that may not quite understand why environmental issues should be a place where they should put their focus. Can you explain the dangers or concerns that you may have as a policy person if we do regulations and roll back some of the gains we've made around environmental and climate and things of that nature?
Yeah, the news nationally has been worrisome. I've been watching some of the Supreme Court decisions that have come down recently, and I'm
Wow.
very concerned. But what I think is most important to recognize is state advocacy for environmental regulation and environmental protection has become more important than ever. I think the clearest answer there is that we're on the brink of some major decisions when it comes to preventing or minimizing the impact of climate change. And that's a real problem that we're already seeing the effects of. You can look at our coastal areas and see that we're seeing increased flooding. They're predicting a horrible hurricane season this year, and that's going to make major impacts on regular, everyday people in South Carolina. But even aside from the climate change issues, I mean, we've got to have clean drinking water. We want to have clean air. We've seen people that live next to coal plants that are suffering with health impacts from the pollution that comes from that. So there's a wide range of issues that are everyday concerns, kitchen table problems that environmental regulation can help address. So I wish that we could see more engagement in the South Carolina General Assembly from people that are concerned about these problems because it really makes a big difference.
And I think you're right that the average person needs to be concerned about it. I will admit to you, it was only a couple of years ago that I started really becoming aware of like environmental justice issues and things of that nature, and realizing that, as I was advocating for certain populations, that they were most at risk for environmental issues when it came to, especially when it comes to people who live in socially economic depressed areas and Black and brown people. So it needs to be part of, environmental issues need to be part of our advocacy, that we advocate when we advocate for other issues, also advocating for that. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the upcoming elections. So I noticed that CVSC endorses candidates, and you endorsed some for the June primary and November election coming up. Can you tell us what an endorsement from CVSC means?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of CVSC's values is that we are a bipartisan organization. And I think that's really important in South Carolina because we're such a red state. So we're really focused on building a bipartisan coalition of legislative champions that are going to advance causes that protect the environment. And so when you receive an endorsement from CVSC, you know that we think that you're capable and willing to do that. We're very strategic. Our campaign team is extremely strategic in how they get involved and where they get involved and how much money they spend. But they're leveraging our network of partnerships and connections with community organizations, donors, and we're engaging in our own advocacy campaigns, knocking on doors, making phone calls, doing mail, any sort of those traditional campaign tactics we're going to utilize in order to get you to win. And I mean, I think we've seen pretty good success rate across the years and across the elections that we've participated in, where we've shown that environmental protection matters to South Carolinians, and that's going to help get you elected if you can, convince voters that you're going to be doing that.
That is interesting that environmental issues are an area where you do have bipartisan support, because so often there is polarizing opinions on different issues, and that you were able as an organization to get buy-in from both sides of the aisle when it comes to environmental issues.
I think the environmental community in South Carolina, not just CVSC, our partners as well, have done a really excellent job of making environmental protection a nonpartisan issue. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, but you need clean drinking water, no matter where you live or what your socioeconomic status is. We've got people that want to get out and hunt and fish. I mean, that's a major part of South Carolina's culture, and people want to get out there and protect that. And then, some things like clean energy and less pollution are good economic drivers. People want to come to a state that's going to be welcoming and fresh and clean for them to live in. So we've done a really good job of making them a nonpartisan issue. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to see that some of our champions are Republican. Some of our best champions are Republicans. And we work very well across both sides of that aisle.
Well, definitely kudos to y'all for being able to work across the aisle and get things passed. So speaking of getting things passed, I know that there will be pre-filing coming up in a couple of months for the 2025-2026 legislative set, or 2025-27 legislative session. And so we'll be getting ready to figure out what the issues are. So are there any exciting issues you can give us a preview of that y'all plan to work for or work on next year?
Yeah, I think I see us working in a lot of different areas, but two that I'm particularly excited about and I think are going to be very impactful to regular, everyday South Carolinians. And the first thing, one of the things that I talk to lawmakers about, and I hear it from almost every single lawmaker across the board, urban, rural, Republican, Democrat, upstate, low country, is they're really worried about sprawl. South Carolina is the fastest growing state in the country, and we have to really think deliberatively about how we welcome that growth in so that we're protecting our environmental resources, so that we're able to protect the character of our neighborhoods, to protect affordable housing, so that we're not building high density development in flood prone zones. We have to think about smart growth so that we can welcome all of this new opportunity into the state, but we're not putting our citizens at risk. So one of the things I think we'll be working on throughout this off season is pulling together partners and stakeholders from a diverse group of backgrounds that have some knowledge and expertise in this area so that we can find where the common ground is in terms of how we can implement some tools for smart growth. And so we're really excited to see where that program grows. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think this is the new phase of how we protect land and resources in South Carolina. So that is one area where I see us playing in quite a bit. And then the other area is probably in the energy space. Last session, CVSC spearheaded a campaign to stop an omnibus energy bill that was kind of rolling pretty quickly through the General Assembly. I think it was one of the most impactful pieces of legislation in terms of having negative effects on the environment and climate change that we've seen in a long while. And the bill never did pass, which is a good thing. But South Carolina still has to have some pretty tough discussions about what its energy future looks like. Do we want to, start thinking ahead and integrate more clean energy into our system so that we can lower rates and protect the environment? Or do we want to kind of continue on with old technologies and old ways of generating energy like fossil fuels and kind of commit ourselves to that path for the next 40 or 50 years? South Carolina's growing. It's going to need more energy, and we have to have those really difficult decisions about how we get that energy and who pays for it and all of the things that come along with that.
Yeah, I would have never thought of development and affordable housing and things of that nature as being an environmental issue, but I definitely can understand how it does impact the environment. And these are things that impact everyday voters. So, in our last couple of minutes, what would you tell our voters who are listening about, what they should be doing this election season? What should they be focusing on when it comes to environmental issues? Just anything that you think that would help our voters move move on this issue.
Yeah. I mean, you have to let your elected officials and the people that are running for your seat know that you're out there and that you care about these issues. Because one thing I heard a lot from lawmakers when I started to talk about energy bills, for example, they're too high, was I haven't heard from my constituents about that problem. So it's obviously, it doesn't exist, right? So the only way we can move forward to help protect the environment and to get good results from policy decisions at the General Assembly is if voters are heard. You have to get out, you vote. You've got to reach out to your legislators when you see them doing things that you don't agree with. And so we are, big on accountability at CVSC. We just released our legislative scorecard for the past 2 years. So it's a really useful tool. You can go and look at how your legislator voted on crucial conservation issues. And I think it's a really great tool to let you know kind of where your district stands.
Awesome. So y'all can go to cvsc.org, look at who CVSC has endorsed, look at that scorecard, the things that they are working on. And the reality is, y'all, being part of democracy is work. So it's not just about showing up and voting, although I need y'all to show up and vote because
Please do.
primaries were dismal. So I need y'all to show up in November and vote. But beyond that, as Meagan just said, we've got to be engaged voters and informed voters and making sure that we are holding our elected officials to task when it comes to all issues, including environmental and climate issues, because they are impacting our quality of life here in South Carolina. And so we want to make sure that we are taking action on those issues and not thinking that those are just side issues or issues that are 50, 100 years down the line, but they are impacting us today, it sounds like.
Yes, 100%.
Awesome. Well, Meagan, thank you for taking time to come and speak with us today about what's going on over at CVSC. I'm definitely a fan of the organization and the work that you're doing. As I said, I have been expanding my own knowledge when it comes to environmental justice and what's important about the environment. And so I definitely encourage y'all to go to cvsc.org, read the material, look at the scorecard, look at the endorsed candidates, and learn more about how your environment is very important.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Meagan. All right, y'all. You know the drill. Make sure you subscribe to the Arena SC if you want to continue seeing content like this. please subscribe to the Arena SC so that you can hear from me and my co-collaborators across the podcast world, because we have great podcast interviews coming to you about political issues that impact you. So again, subscribe to the Arena SC. Thanks, y'all.